This is the Twin City News Around Town. A closer look at the people, places, and events around Batesburg, Leesville, Gilbert, and the Ridge. Presented by the Twin City News, Batesburg, Leesville's community journalism since 1925.
All right, welcome in to TCN Around Town, the Twin City News podcast. I am Tony Ballman, happy to be with you here. And it is election season. I know it doesn't seem like it with all the news being dominated by COVID-19, but indeed, in less than 2 weeks, voters here in South Carolina will go to the polls for the June 9th primaries. And one of the races on the ballot at that time is a contested race for the GOP nomination for U.S. Senate. Lindsey Graham, of course, has represented South Carolina in the Senate since 2003, but he is challenged this time by 3 other GOP challengers, and one of those coming to me from the Holy City, right?
North Charleston.
North Charleston. Well, it counts. Anything south of some.
Anything. We get all the paper mill smell up here.
Hey, anything south of Santee counts, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, Joe Reynolds, and thank you so very much for joining me, Mr. Reynolds.
Great to be here, Tony, and a shout out to all your listeners. Thanks.
Well, let's start out, first of all, talking about, take about 2 minutes and introduce yourself to my audience here.
Well, I graduated from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in 1987. A lot of people aren't familiar with that academy. It's a fifth service academy we have in the United States. I graduated a year behind Mark Kelly, the astronaut, and I don't have astronaut on my resume, but what I do have is chief engineer on my resume. And over 30 years, I've been going to sea, and often in support of our troops bringing equipment over to places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I brought Abrams tanks over and Apache helicopters, mine-resistant vehicles for our Marines in Afghanistan. In fact, just before the virus hit, I met a couple of former Marines who had served in Afghanistan. They asked me if I had been responsible for some of those lifts to Afghanistan, and I said that I had, and they thanked me for that because they knew those saved lives. That's the kind of support I've given the troops over the years. Some politicians, they fly over, they get a ball cap and a hot dog, and then they fly home, and that's the kind of support they say they're giving the troops. Look, when I'm chief engineer out in the middle of the ocean, and something breaks down, I don't have the luxury of saying maybe next year we'll get to it, maybe next election we'll get to it. We need to get to it right away, or the safety of the vessel and the crew is at risk. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people up in Washington who always say maybe after the next election, but after every election, it's another election. So I looked at this problem up in Washington and why we don't get big things done anymore. I looked at it as an engineer troubleshooting a puzzle, and the most gratifying thing I find in my career is when I have an intractable problem on the vessel. Me and my team work hard, we're persistent, we're relentless. We keep working it and working it and working it. And then the day or the time that we finally figure it out and we solve it, that this immense gratification comes through. So I started looking at Congress. Why is it broken? Well, we got the wrong people up there is the problem. We got people who are very good at getting reelected, but they're not very good at getting down to work and getting their hands dirty and trying to do the right thing for America. You don't hear a lot about Social Security Trust Fund running out, Medicare Trust Funding running out, our national debt soaring. The politicians keep putting that aside because Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, they want to protect their members from hard votes. So, it all goes hand in hand. Congress has kind of given away some of its power to the executive branch and the judges, and they make the laws. And we'll get to this deeper, I guess, with more of your questions.
Yes, we will. Well,
that's a general idea of what my campaign is about.
And you introduced yourself as an engineer, as a merchant marine. And how concerned are you that as a member of the Republican Party, that the GOP is really becoming seen in many eyes as kind of the party that rejects science in favor of economics, particularly against the backdrop of COVID-19? There seems to have, in some circles of the GOP, there seems to have been open season declared on science.
I'm incredibly concerned, really, but I think the tide is starting to turn. I see a lot of former Republicans who had been climate denialists or saying that it's not a real problem, coming around and saying, no, it's real. We have to look at it. We have to keep our eye on it. The thing about the Republican Party that concerns me, sorry, I'm just going to move this.
Yeah, I've got light issues too. So.
The thing that concerns me about the Republican Party is we keep pushing people away. You know, we push people of color away by the things we do. We try to say the nice things, but we don't really follow through with the good things. We push people, LGBTQ people away with the things. We have a lawsuit in South Carolina now that is attempting to Attorney General Wilson has joined a lawsuit to keep discrimination against gay people so that landlords can throw gay people out of their homes. I don't agree with it. You know, we're pushing young people away when we say there's no such thing as climate change. It's obviously something they're very concerned about. You know, we're trying to limit the party, and we're trying to make it purer in some respects, and that's unfortunate because if we keep making it pure, we're going to have about 6 members in a few years, and we're not going to have anybody that votes for us. We got to expand the party, and we got to have all kinds of different people in it, and I'm one of those different people. Now, I am a conservative. I'm conservative on regulations. I'll vote for conservative justices. I'm a fiscal conservative. I think we should, save our pennies. And when we had all these lovely years of economic growth, we didn't save for that, leak in the roof. And now look where we are. We're spending more money and we're in a deeper hole.
There are going to be Republicans who hear you talking and who have probably heard you talking, if this is standard campaign stuff that you talk about on the campaign trail, there are going to be Republicans that say, Joe Reynolds is a rhino. He is a Republican in name only. He is a liberal in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, that's an epithet I get, and I'll wear it with a badge of honor, Tony. To tell you the truth, if the Republican Party doesn't accept people who are fiscal conservatives and who are moderate on social issues, then there isn't going to be a party. So you got to wake up and stop running off the cliff. It's like they're getting in the car, they're Thelma and Louise. They think they can have a party with no young people, with no people of color. Look, the president himself is trying to attract people of color, Hispanics and African Americans, and they are, relatively conservative in their hearts. They're religious people who, care about, a number of issues that the Republican Party cares about, but we can't capture those people because we keep, sending the wrong messages. We say the right things. We had a lovely Black History Month, and we had a lot of African Americans there. It was a wonderful event. And we had a lot of people, we say the right things, but sometimes then we do the wrong things, especially when it comes to criminal justice reform and things of that nature.
You brought that up. We are in the midst right now of a very tense time in our country. George Floyd, Minneapolis, it's on the headlines last night, this morning. Black men are afraid, they're angry, and the Black community is afraid. And overnight, we get the president tweeting that, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Is that the inclusive message that the GOP should be sending?
No, that's exactly the wrong thing to say. I understand the heartfelt and sincere emotional responses from both sides, but we have to step back a bit. I see. Listen, I walk around places, and I don't want to say the wrong thing here. How do I put it? I walk around places and I see that people are desperate in some communities, and they really feel that when you're that desperate and you feel you're completely powerless, the one thing you can do to show your protest is break into a store. That's really sad. It's pitiful. People in the Republican Party have to understand the mindset behind it. They just say it's a bunch of thugs, law and order, get the blue badges, get the badges out there, get the police. I understand they shouldn't be breaking into stores, but you have to understand why they did it. They feel like they're completely powerless, and when you're completely powerless, you do things like that. You lash out. We need to listen more instead of tell people things.
People of color, the GOP has been trying to attract people of color. In fact, one of the people in this race next in 2 weeks is a person of color, a very respected leader, person of color. But I think, given the backdrop of what's happening now in Minneapolis, and take it back to the early days of the Trump administration, given what happened with the immigration issue at the border, where kids were in cages and things like that. And I know that immigration reform is one of the issues on your website that you believe is a necessary pillar of, if you were to be elected to the Senate. How do brown people figure into this equation of inclusiveness in the Republican Party?
Well, right now they I have a motto at my school, my former school, U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. It's acta non verba. It's deeds, not words. You can say all the right things, but then when you don't act in a way that means something to people, then they understand that. People of color instinctively understand that the Republican Party is not doing the best that they can for them. Now, when we have immigration, we have 11 million people here who are living illegally, and I meet people every day who wear the red hat, and they say, Joe, there's a bunch of illegals. And I say, yep, there are. I went out delivering food for a Muslim charity, and believe it or not, I met a lot of people who appeared to me to be undocumented immigrants. Now, when you are on the ground and you see undocumented immigrants day in, day out, it sours your view on legal immigration. And that's what some people don't understand in Washington, is they live in that bubble. They say we need immigration reform, but they don't understand the people on the ground actually see the undocumented immigrants. Now, it's wrong to be here as an undocumented immigrant. There's 11 million of them. So the solution isn't throw them all out, because we're throwing about 200,000 out a year. It's going to take us 55 years to throw them all out. I don't want to eliminate ICE like some of the Democratic Party people want. I just want to have American solutions to American problems. Building a wall, absolutely. Where the Border Patrol wants it, where they need it, that's what we have to do. But see, we don't do these deals anymore. We don't make them. It's too much partisan divide. And the people in power like Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer know that any vote on immigration is the third rail of American politics. They don't want to touch it. So we never get to the big issues. We pass them by. Now, I'd work with Democrats, and I think, sometimes people are going to say, Joe, you can't work with those demon rats, or you can't work with those people who are traitors. And I say, look, I know this 81-year-old woman. She puts her flag out every day. She voted Democrat all her life. I have some disagreements with her on policy, but I know she's a good person. I know she doesn't hate America. I know she's not a traitor. I know she doesn't love terrorists. You know why I know? Because she's my mother. We all have family and friends who are Democrats, Republicans. Politics is not the only thing in our lives. And we need to calm down a little bit and start to see each other as friends and neighbors instead of, these awful names we call each other.
One of your fellow challengers to Lindsey Graham was on the podcast yesterday, Michael LaPierre, and he effectively said that Lindsey Graham is a fake conservative, that he is far too close to liberal. What's your take on the extreme partisanship that exists in this country right now? You touched on it in the story about your mother, but there seems to be that chasm between ideological thought on the left and ideological thought on the right seems to keep getting deeper with every day.
Well, a large part of it is the media, which I can't control, but also part of it is the leadership. We're not leading and telling people that you know, it's okay to have a mother who's a Democrat, or it's okay to have a brother who's a Republican. You know, we're not telling people things like that. Instead, we're feeding that beast. We see that media machine. We see the people out there on Facebook. I get it every day. You know, if you don't want constitutional carry, Joe, go be a Democrat. We see it. I see it all the time. And the problem is that the politicians see it too, and they don't see it as something to fight. They don't see it as something to put a hand up and say, okay, let's stop. They see it as an opportunity to get reelected, and they're very good at it. So they use that partisanship to get reelected, and the incumbency has its advantages, and you get a lot of money up there, and then they get reelected, and they do it over and over again. We need real leaders who are going to say, look, it's all right to have a mother who's a Democrat. You know, our political problems are not the only problems in our lives. We can work through things and get things done.
From the top down, though, you alluded to the media, and I would agree that there are segments of the media that stoke this fire of divisiveness. But from the top down in the GOP, there seems to be an inclination to pick up everybody in the media and drop them into the basket of fake news. Would you be inclined to issue that sort of blanket indictment against against journalism in this country?
Absolutely not. I know journalists. I know they work very hard.
I do.
You know, some of them. You know what? I think a senator I admire, he's passed away, was Senator Rudman of New Hampshire. He was a Republican. You know, he was a very fiscal conservative. But I remember something he said. Somebody commented to Senator Rudman about President Reagan. Well, you know, the Democrats are out to get him, and the media is biased against him. And Senator Rudman said, so what? That's irrelevant. Leader, you know, I say leaders lead. You know, it doesn't matter if the media is bashing you or the Democrats are out to get you. If you want to lead the country, you got to make it through that. You know, you can't just say, oh, you know, pity me. You got to be able to stand up and be a leader. And I think that's lacking in Congress, especially. People latch on to some of these you know, trends, and they take advantage of them. And I think it's disappointing, really.
Let's distill this down to the issues. If you will, pick 3 table legs that you feel like your platform stands on to challenge Lindsey Graham, and talk about some of the 3 big issues in your mind.
The 3 big issues in my mind are I want ethics in Washington. So I'm going to use my vote. It's going to be an evenly divided Senate, and I'm going to use that vote with Mitch McConnell to say, listen, we got to have some reforms here. We don't get anything done in the Senate. We have a bunch of old men wandering the halls asking what's for lunch, and that's it. Once in a while, they vote on a judge. We need to start having debate on the floor and taking votes. And to do that, I'm going to start with I have 2 ethics rules. One ethics rule is that during the legislative work week, there's no fundraising. When you're gavelled in on Monday and you get out on Thursday or Wednesday, there's no fundraising. You work that week. That's for your constituents. That's not for you to. They get gavelled in up there. They walk across the street and they start fundraising. They spend more than half their time in Washington fundraising. That's why they're not getting things done. Because if your only goal is to raise money and get reelected, then you shouldn't be a political party in this country, in my mind. My second ethics rule is no fundraising in Washington, D.C. It's not a bazaar. It's not a place where you go to K Street to have a Chardonnay and a canapé. It's a place to get down to the dirty work of legislating. And I know it can be tough sometimes, but so what? You know, I'm an engineer. I get my hands dirty all the time at sea, and I know how to work. A lot of these guys have never known what it means to do real, honest labor. They're up there as professional career politicians. I mean, look, when I was 9 years old, I was begging my dad to watch Happy Days, and he said, no, it's on a school night. Chuck Grassley and Patrick Leahy were already in Congress. I'm a 54-year-old man. They're still there. They aren't part of the solution to the problem. They're part of the problem. I also have a new oath of office that is going, The last time it was revised was 1966. I think we need a refresh. We have this insider trading that Senator Burr has been involved in. We have people who leave Washington and become lobbyists immediately, the revolving door. We have people who go into think tanks, people who make money off their careers as politicians, or their families do. Look at Hunter Biden. Does he really deserve $50,000 a month to work for some gas company in Ukraine? We have Hillary Clinton making $200,000 a speech for Goldman Sachs. And we have Nikki Haley making $200,000 a speech, complete with a private jet. These people aren't deserving of this money because they're great speakers or they're great consultants. They're getting it because it's access to the political machine. I looked at the Judiciary Committee when Mark Zuckerberg was attending. 18 out of the 20 members had received money from Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg must have been laughing. To him, it's chump change to give every politician money. That's what I'm trying to root out. Those are the legs of my platform.
You'd have a lot of empty apartments in Arlington if you drain the lobbyist swamp.
No, you're not going to get rid of it all, and I'm not trying to get rid of all. I'm just trying to make it a place where maybe, just maybe, we can get some work done instead of focusing on fundraising. I'm not saying you can't fundraise. You can go fundraise in Alexandria, Virginia. It's just going to be a little bit more inconvenient for you to leave Washington, D.C., go to Baltimore, go to Alexandria, and you might say, well, you know, I got some stuff to do here in Washington. Maybe we can work on this bill. Also, the majority and the minority leaders, they're not in the Constitution. Mitch McConnell gets one vote. Chuck Schumer gets one vote. Joe Reynolds gets one vote. None of these people these are just customs and habits we have, but they used to have a function, but now they're just anchors around America. Their only goals now are to reelect their members and retain their power, and then get more money to reelect their members and get more power. I want to break that pattern. I'm an engineer. You know, I say on the ship, you know, you get a wedge to separate two flanges. I'm going to be the wedge up there. I'm going to separate the two flanges and let some real legislation come out.
And term limits. That's one of the things. You recently wrote a blog post that where you said term limits have got to happen. Lindsey Graham in the Senate for the past 17 years. You believe that on June 9th, it's time for Lindsey Graham to be given his walking papers.
Lindsey Graham is a person who has a constituency of one, and Lindsey Graham, and there's a lot of people like him up there, you know, Democrat and Republican. He's a fake, he's a phony. He was the most vocal critic of President Trump before November 9th, and then all of a sudden after Trump won, he's President Trump's biggest supporter. Lindsey Graham is the kind of guy that we've all known at school or in workplaces or in the military, who punches down to the weakest. He thought Trump was going to lose. He was punching down. He thought he was going to be the leader of the party. Then Trump becomes president and he sucks up. He's a punch down, suck up kind of guy. We've all met him at work. We've all met those kind of characters in the military or at school. You know, they're bullying the intern and then they're sucking up to the boss. And those aren't the kind of people we want in Washington. We want people like engineers and nurses and educators who are driven and goal-oriented people. Lindsey Graham is not even here in South Carolina. He's out in the Hamptons raising money. He's out in Beverly Hills raising money from the richest people in America. He doesn't give town halls. He doesn't give open meetings. He doesn't interact with anybody. He's too important. He gets on TV and gives hot takes. But taking responsibility is what I'm going to do. We have a national debt. The first thing I'm going to do is not going to say it's somebody else's fault or it happened not on my watch. I'm going to say I'm on watch. Joe Reynolds is on watch. It's my problem. The national debt is my problem, and I'm going to work to solve it. And if I don't solve it, it's part of my fault. It's my responsibility. Lindsey Graham is the guy who says it's his fault, somebody else's fault. We don't want characters like that. Lindsey Graham's now having these hearings. He does this every 6 years, just as he's about to get reelected. Oh, I got something important to do. I better finish it. You know, it's like the painter on your house. Well, I just started the shed, you know, I better keep painting. We all seen that action from Lindsey before. He does the Lindsey shuffle. He dances a little to the right. He dances a little to the left. But everybody instinctively understands that Lindsey serves only one person, That's Lindsey Graham.
Well, you are one of 4 blocks on that ballot on June 9th, Joe Reynolds. And I'll say this, Lindsey Graham has been invited to be on this podcast. And as you said, campaigns in the Hamptons, campaigns in Beverly Hills. He will have the opportunity to speak to his constituency just as you have. But I just want to tell you how grateful I am that you came aboard. Take about 1 to 2 minutes to wrap up. What's the last thing that you want to leave with the people who might be listening to this?
Well, I'd just like to say, if you want a Congress for you, for the people, not them, for the politicians, the career politicians, the lobbyists, the consultant class, the PACs, the super PACs, the dark money. If you want a Congress that is about us, not them, then vote for me, because I'm only running for 1 term. When I go up there, there's no campaigning, there's no fundraising. I work for you, not my reelection. All these guys go up there, they get sucked into the money machine, and you never see them again. I'm not going to do that. Have a look at my website, reynolds2020.com. Kick the tires. Send me an email, and you can find me on Facebook and give a comment. I'm available 24/7. It's great to be here, Tony, and thanks a lot for having me.
Joe Reynolds, GOP candidate for U.S. Senate. June 9th is the primary, and he's one of 4 people, as I mentioned, who are on that ballot. Thank you again so much for being with me. That's got to do it for this edition of the Twin City News Podcast, TCN Around Town. I appreciate your listening, and keep listening. Ideally, we're going to have Duke Buckner on the show tomorrow, and at some point between June 9th, ideally, you'll be able to hear from the incumbent Senator Lindsey Graham. What do you think the chances of that are, Joe?
Of him attending your podcast?
Slim to none?
I don't think you have a chance there. I think you have a better chance of playing shortstop this year for a Major League Baseball team. I don't see it happening. He never attends anything.
All right, that's got to do it. As I always say, take care of yourself, take care of somebody, and love somebody today. I'll talk to you tomorrow.